It all began in a small neighborhood where laughter, cricket matches, and evening chit-chats filled the air. Ayan and Mihar grew up next door to each other, separated only by a narrow fence that never really stood between their hearts. From the moment they were old enough to speak, they became inseparable partners in every mischief, every secret, and every childhood adventure. Ayan would throw small pebbles at Mihar's window every morning before school, and she would respond with a sleepy smile, always late but always worth the wait. Their parents would often joke, "Indano ka rishta to bakpan se te hai," and while both would blush and deny it, a tiny part of their hearts held on to that thought as years passed. The innocence of their friendship slowly began to change. Puberty brought not only changes in them but in the way they saw each other. Mihar, who once climbed trees with Ayan, now avoided his gaze when he smiled. Ayan, who used to tease her endlessly, now found himself watching her quietly from the balcony as she studied under the porch light. Neither of them confessed, but both knew something deeper was growing. Still, life moved on. They went to different colleges, met new people, and discovered new worlds. The conversations that once lasted hours became shorter. Messages became infrequent. But even in silence, the bond remained. One winter evening during college break, Ayan returned home and saw Mihar standing near their old mango tree, the one they once claimed as their secret base. Her hair fluttered in the cold wind, and she looked almost the same, yet entirely different. When she turned and saw him, time seemed to pause. "You're back," she said softly. "Always," he replied with a smile. It was that moment when both realized how much they had missed each other. That night, they talked for hours about college, life, and everything they had never said. When Ayan finally walked back to his house, he couldn't help but glance back. She was still standing there, watching him, her eyes saying what words couldn't. But fate rarely lets love flow easily. Soon, Mihar's father got transferred to another city. Ayan didn't know what hurt more, her leaving or the fact that he had never told her how he truly felt. On the day she was moving, he stood silently by the gate, hands in his pockets, pretending to be okay. Mihar came forward, trying to be brave, and said, "Take care of the mango tree for me." He smiled faintly, "Only if you promise to come back for it." She nodded but didn't answer. The car door closed, and just like that, his best friend, his secret love, was gone. The next few years were a blur of career struggles, loneliness, and memories that refused to fade. One evening, years later, Ayan was standing on the same balcony, now older, more mature, and perhaps a little lonelier. The neighborhood had changed, new families, new kids, but the mango tree still stood tall. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice call out, "You didn't take care of the tree very well." His heart skipped a beat. He turned, and there she was, Mihar, smiling, holding her luggage, looking just like the dream he never stopped seeing. "You came back," he whispered. "I promised, didn't I?" she said, walking toward him. They talked for hours again, this time not as children but as two souls who had wandered long enough to understand what they truly wanted. Mihar had ended a long engagement that didn't feel right, and Ayan had never found anyone who made him feel the way she did. Standing under the old tree, she finally said, "I don't want to run away anymore." Ayan took her hand gently and replied, "Then don't. Stay here, with me." It started to rain lightly, just like it used to when they were kids playing in puddles. This time, they didn't run for shelter. They just stood there, laughing, soaking, finally together. The world around them had changed, but their love, the one born next door and nurtured through years of silence, had survived everything. And under that same mango tree, where it all began, Ayan finally whispered, "You were always the girl next door. I just took a lifetime to realize you were also the love of my life." Ayan and Mihar had been neighbors for as long as they could remember. Their houses were separated by nothing more than a short white fence that both families often forgot existed. As children, they climbed over it so many times that the paint had chipped off. Every morning, before school, Ayan would sneak out of his house with a slice of bread in his hand, climb the fence, and knock on Mihar's window. "Wake up, sleepyhead," he would whisper, and Mihar, still half asleep, would groan and throw a pillow at him. Yet, a few minutes later, she'd be ready with her bag, matching his pace as they walked together down the lane. Their mothers would watch them from the gates, smiling at their innocent bickering and the laughter that never seemed to stop. They grew up together sharing crayons, secrets, and even punishments. When Ayan broke the neighbor's window playing cricket, Mihar had taken the blame because he had promised to teach her to whistle. When she fell off her bicycle, he carried her home crying louder than she was, afraid he'd lose his best friend. Every festival, every summer vacation, every exam result, their lives revolved around each other. The whole neighborhood knew them as the inseparable two at that time. Neither of them knew what love was, but even then, they knew life would feel empty without the other. Then came college. Different cities, different lives. The first few months were full of excitement, daily calls, late-night texts, sharing every small detail. But slowly, distance crept in. Classes, new friends, new experiences, life pulled them in different directions. Ayan missed her voice, the way she'd scold him for being careless. Mihar missed the comfort of knowing someone was always there, no matter what. They both pretended to be fine, but the gap between them widened quietly, like a crack you don't notice until it breaks something precious. 3 years later, Ayan returned home during winter break. The house next door looked the same, yet emptier, without her laughter echoing from it. One evening, while walking near the old mango tree, he saw her. She was standing under it, wearing a simple sweater, her hair tied up like she used to in school. For a moment he froze, felt unreal, like stepping into an old dream. She turned and smiled. "You look the same," she said softly. He laughed nervously. "You don't. You look different. In a good way." That night, they walked for hours, catching up on lost years, talking about everything and nothing. Felt like no time had passed at all. But beneath their smiles, there were questions neither dared to ask. "Do you still think about me? Did I ever cross your mind?" Over the next few weeks, they met often. Coffee runs, evening walks, the same old rooftop conversations. Everything slowly came back. But just when Ayan started believing they might get a second chance, reality struck. Mihar told him her father was being transferred to Delhi permanently. The news hit him like a storm. He wanted to tell her everything, how he loved her, how he had waited all these years, but fear held him back. What if she didn't feel the same? What if he lost even her friendship? On her last day in the neighborhood, she came to say goodbye. The air felt heavy with everything unsaid. "Take care of the mango tree for me," she said, forcing a smile. "Only if you promise to come back," he replied, trying to sound casual, but his voice trembled. She nodded, looked at him one last time, and left. That night, he stood by the window for hours, staring at her empty balcony, realizing how much of himself he had lost with her departure. Years passed. Ayan built his career, moved to another city, and tried to live like he was fine. But every time it rained, every time he saw someone with a laugh like hers, the memories came rushing back. Mihar, too, tried to move on. She got engaged, but something inside her always felt incomplete, as if a part of her heart was still waiting by that mango tree. Then one day, fate brought her back. Her engagement had ended not in anger, but in quiet realization that her heart belonged elsewhere. She returned to her old house to help her parents settle back after retirement. Ayan, now back in the neighborhood for work, had no idea. That evening, as he stood near the mango tree lost in thought, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "You didn't take care of the tree very well." He froze. Turning slowly, he saw her, Mihar, standing there with the same mischievous smile, her eyes glistening with warmth. "You came back," he whispered. "I promised, didn't I?" she replied. The silence that followed was heavy, but comfortable, like home. They talked for hours, laughing, teasing, and finally letting go of years of hesitation. When she finally looked into his eyes, she said, "You never said goodbye properly." He smiled. "Because I never believed it was the end." That night, they walked under the drizzle, the same way they once did as kids, this time not afraid of getting wet or getting caught. Mihar stopped and said, "Do you ever think how different things would have been if we hadn't drifted apart?" Ayan looked at her gently.
No.
"Because I believe we were meant to find our way back, no matter how far we went." And under that old mango tree, their childhood witness, he finally said the words that had waited a lifetime. "I've loved you since the day I threw pebbles at your window. I just didn't know it then." Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "I've been waiting to hear that since the day you fixed my broken bicycle." Rain poured harder, but neither moved. They just stood there, arms around each other, laughing through tears. The world around them faded, but in that moment, everything was right again. That night, Ayan finally realized that sometimes love doesn't need grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes, it just needs two people who've known each other all their lives to finally say what was always meant to be. And as he looked at Mihar, drenched, smiling, standing under the tree that had seen it all, he knew the girl next door was never just a memory. She was, and always would be, his forever. Ayan and Mihar stood there for a long time under the rain, feeling as if every drop was washing away the distance of all those years. When they finally went home, both their families were surprised to see them together again, soaked, smiling, and glowing with something no one had seen before. Mihar's mother laughed softly. "Looks like the neighbors are back to their old ways." Ayan's father smiled knowingly. He had always believed the story wasn't over, and the days that followed, their bond only grew stronger. They spent every evening together, walking through familiar streets, rediscovering little memories tucked in every corner: the park bench where they used to share ice cream, the lane where Mihar once fell and he carried her home, and the shop where they bought friendship bands every year. Every moment felt like stepping back into a beautiful past. Only this time they were mature enough to understand what it truly meant. One afternoon, Mihar was helping Ayan's mother set the table when she found an old photo album. Inside was a faded picture of her and Ayan as kids, holding hands and grinning with missing teeth. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at it. "You two have always been meant for each other," Ayan's mother said gently. Mihar smiled shyly, realizing how deeply their story had been rooted in everyone's hearts. That evening, Ayan took Mihar back to the mango tree once more. The sunset cast a golden glow over everything, just like the old days. He held her hand, his eyes steady and filled with emotion. "You know," he said softly, "I don't want to wait anymore. I've waited my whole life to tell you how much I love you. I don't ever want to let you go again." Mihar looked at him, tears glistening but a smile playing on her lips. "Then don't," she whispered. He knelt down right there, not with a grand ring or a fancy speech, but with the same sincerity that had always defined their friendship. "Will you marry me, Mihar? Not as the girl next door, not as my childhood friend, but as the love I never stopped waiting for." Her answer came before he could even finish a simple, trembling yes. Their families celebrated together, laughing, teasing, crying happy tears. It felt like something long overdue had finally found its rightful ending. Their wedding was simple in the backyard between their two houses, just like old times. Fairy lights hung from the mango tree, their childhood pictures strung together like memories woven in light. The same neighbors who'd once watched them grow up now cheered as they exchanged vows. When Ayan placed the ring on her finger, he whispered, "I promise you, Mihar, I'll never let distance or time come between us again." She smiled through tears, replying, "And I promise to keep waking up to you, even if it means throwing pillows again." Everyone laughed, and for the first time in years, both houses were filled with joy that spilled into the street as night fell. They sat quietly under the stars, just like they did as kids. No words, just peace. The sound of laughter from their families, the flicker of warm lights, and the scent of rain-soaked earth surrounded them. Ayan looked at her and said softly, "You know, I used to think growing up meant losing things, but with you, I feel like I've found everything again." Mihar rested her head on his shoulder. "Maybe love isn't about finding someone new," she said. "Maybe it's about recognizing the one who's been beside you all along." And as the world around them slowly drifted into quiet, the two hearts that had once shared fences, secrets, and dreams finally shared a life, one that began long ago between two neighboring houses, and now would go on forever. The boy and the girl next door had finally come home, not just to their childhood lane, but to each other.